This past Sunday was Palm Sunday, the day we remember the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem as he prepares for his crucifixion and resurrection. It's an interesting time. Jesus is celebrated with a king's welcome. You can almost see it, and let me try to paint you a picture. Imagine the backdrop of a dry Mediterranean town, complete with all the rocks and the dust you can imagine. The people are going crazy at the sight of and at the thought of Jesus, the Messiah, the one whom the prophets foretold. They're shouting, "Hosanna in the highest." Now there's an interesting thing about the word Hosanna. It's a Hebrew word that mixes a shout of praise with a prayer that God will save his people and do it soon. Remember that. The palm branches are waving and people are throwing down their garments to help make way for this answer to their prayers. And while it doesn't jive with our understanding of nobility and aristocracy, Jesus' choice of a donkey is a callback to King David and his choice of transportation for he and his son. The donkey is, contrary to our rather negative view of donkeys as smelly beasts of burden, the topping on this rather extravagant cake. The problem with Jesus' presence among the people and the people's desire for such a man as Jesus is they got exactly what they wanted. See, the very next day, Jesus goes into the temple and begins to make even more enemies than he had with his previous preaching, by verbally lashing those who would turn a house of God into a marketplace for the selling of goods with the intent of ruthless profiteering. This set off the noses of those who would eventually arrest him, try him, and execute him. For the rest of the week, the priests and the Pharisees asked him questions and set up traps to find a way to arrest him. They weren't able to until Judas's betrayal. All of this was exactly what the people desired. They were searching for someone who would stand up to the Romans and the other corrupt and ruthless leaders who had persecuted them and oppressed them, and Jesus seemed to be that person. The problem comes in when they realize just what their role in all of this was. See, they actually had something to do. In Mark's account of Jesus' final week, he recounts the story of the widow's offering. Jesus' parable spoke of all the wealthy people giving because they could, and the widow giving all that she had. If all Jesus' other preaching didn't already make it clear, to be in a relationship with God and to follow Jesus' example took a dedication that actually meant something, not just because you could. By the end of the week, come the time he was arrested, tried, and executed, he had been abandoned by all those who had vowed to follow him. Now this should tell everyone coming after him, including us, that to be a follower of Christ, one who desires to serve God, is going to cost us something. This week, Holy Week, ends with the resurrection. We should try and contemplate and understand the tremendous grace and mercy wrapped up in that act. However, we have a job to do once that's over. We're called by God to serve. That service, modeled after the life and ministry of Jesus, is not going to be easy. We will have to step out of our comfort zone. It will actually cost us something. Out of the Easter story, we don't just get Jesus riding in like a hero to save us. We get our calling. Matthew 28 says, "Go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you." And what has he commanded us to do? Well, we'll take the greatest one. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, this is not an easy life to live, I'll admit that. Living in service and putting God above all and putting neighbor as self. Jesus was the answer to that massive crowd's prayer. He is the example God sent to show us how to live our lives. God loved us enough to send him. We just got to love God enough to follow his example, no matter how difficult it is.